Welcome back to another episode of the Bold American podcast brought to you by Barstool Sports. Packed show today. We're going to get into the new F-47 fighter jet program that was announced in the last few days. Tesla vandalism is on the rise. The Air Force and Navy are currently warning all of their troops about political speech amid all of the changes in the Trump administration. And then we are going to get into a list that came out by a military historian, and we're going to break down his 5 most realistic military movies. Might be some disputes in that. We'll see. But then that leads perfectly into our interview with Colonel Larry Perino. Some may know that name. Most of you probably do not, but I guarantee you do know the name Black Hawk Down in the Battle of Mogadishu, which is where Colonel, then Lieutenant Perino, was fighting. So interesting conversation with Colonel Perino. But before we get to all of that, school circle on me, last 72. Ryan, talk to me. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, last 72. I spent all day on the radio here in Philly on Friday, did a radiothon for the Travis Manion Foundation. And, we were just talking, raised $120,000
Amazing.
for TMF. And it's like, radio is not dead. Let me tell you, there are still people listening to radio all day. So that was pretty cool. And then I was
say, one of the things I miss about Barstool, I miss that we had a Sirius station.
That was
I used to do that all the time. I was on Barstool Breakfast a lot. I would fill in for Chaps and Kate when they were not able to do their show and bouncing on different shows. There's just something about live radio that's still, I think, very, very appealing, and people are still very much in their car. So I think it's definitely a thing. So awesome that you raise that amount of money, but also quasi not surprising, Ryan.
Yeah, I was like, I love radio. Like I was on from 2 to 7, and I was like, I freaking love this. And then I spent the weekend in Philadelphia. The NCAA wrestling championships were here. The city was electric, and the last match of the night was a second lieutenant in the Air Force you couldn't, there will be a movie about this. Like, you could not write this story. You got the president sitting right there as this guy upsets an Olympic champion. It was unbelievable.
There were some iconic images out of that night. And Connor and I were like searching who this cat was. He's a second lieutenant Air Force Academy grad.
Yeah.
So shout out to that guy. We need him on the pod one of these days.
Yeah, wrestling for Oklahoma State. Wyatt Hendrickson. He was seen saluting President Trump after the win, which, stands to reason. He's the commander-in-chief. You're a second lieutenant. So I thought that was a cool image. One thing that I didn't realize, because I'm not deep into the wrestling game, but he walked out with an American flag draped on his shoulders. And I guess in the wrestling community, that's something that's really reserved typically for only Olympians that can do it and have won their matches in the Olympics. So I guess his opponent, Gable Stevenson, who's we don't even need to go into his resume. It's crazy. They kind of had a chat before the match, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And maybe he didn't realize he was a second lieutenant in the Air Force. I think you get a pass if you're a service member, although you're not an Olympian.
Get a pass for that. I mean, my guy he looked so stoic too and professional afterwards. I mean, what a good weekend for that guy. You got a little boost of Americana just looking at those images.
Oh, it was awesome. And then I headed down to McGillen's big Irish bar right in Philadelphia.
I love McGillen's.
Yeah.
I love McGillen's.
So great. We're in there, and literally everywhere you turned, it was just cauliflower ear. And I was like, these are my people. I grew up on the wrestling mat, around wrestlers. So I was just in my element. It was an awesome time.
Yeah, that's always something you should notice too for the young folks who are ever at a bar. If you ever see somebody with cauliflower ear randomly, like, just don't mess with them, because they're either a wrestler or a UFC guy. Anybody with cauliflower ear is not someone that you want to get in a tussle with, at least of all at a bar.
Yeah. So
that's always the sign.
That was my 72.
Rob, how about you, buddy?
What's up, guys? Yeah, similar to Ryan, it was very sports entertainment kind of based the last weekend here. As we know, March Madness kicked off late last weekend. I'm a Vegas resident. I'm a proud Vegas resident. This city goes fucking nuts for March Madness. I had some buddies come into town. It's like an annual thing we do. We got the bottle service, we got the hookup, the treatment, everything at Circus Sports. It's that crazy casino with like the stadium swim, amphitheater thing. We were down.
Oh, you were at that place.
What's that?
You were at that place.
We were at that place. I actually showed up at 8 a.m. and it was already popping, man. But everyone knows I'm sober. I'm not drinking, so I was sipping my Heineken Zeros. It was still just as fun. I was able to drive home safely around 11:30 a.m. right when Duke tipped off. And it was starting to get a little crazy, but I had to get back to some work and everything else in the house. But dude, it's just awesome. It's even if you're not drinking or partying, March Madness in Vegas is something everyone has to check out. People are betting like 20K next to you. They're losing their shit. But it was a great Friday. And then, funny enough, I was actually, now that I'm not drinking, just to caveat off that, I put like 10 fucking things in the house together, 10 pieces of furniture together. The house is looking incredible. I got the maximalist, the minimalist, the boho vibe, everything going on. But just a chill weekend, doing some more workouts for Ryan's Travis WOD coming up here in a few weeks.
Love it.
Working out my glutes and everything. So yeah, life's great, guys.
Putting together furniture is honestly the bane of my existence. And actually, when I moved into my house, I moved in on December 7th, and then I was leaving the next morning to drive up to Boston for the Army-Navy game, which that's still talked about in my house as not a good weekend and not a good day. That I left my wife and 6-month-old daughter to drive away after we had just moved into our house. I don't think that'll ever sit well. But I was up to like 3 a.m. trying to get everything knocked out, putting together furniture, just so she would have less of a reason to be mad at me. I think she'll always have a reason to be mad at me. But I empathize with you on that. All right, let's get into it. Over the weekend or end of last week, I saw that there was a new fighter jet program announced by President Trump and Secretary Hegseth in the Oval Office. The F-47 program. Wonder why it's called the F-47 program. Nevertheless, the F-47 program was announced to be the 6th generation fighter jet. Looks pretty cool. One thing I think that's important to mention is that if you have something of this scale, I think it's like a $20 billion contract. This is not something that kind of just, this happened back in January that, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth put together. This has been going on for years. The Air Force has been working with Boeing, with Lockheed Martin to figure out what was going to happen. So obviously President Trump is going to claim and Secretary Hegseth are going to claim responsibility because it's happening now. But this is something that's been in the works for a little bit while. It is going to replace the F-22 Raptor, which is a very cool jet and something I didn't realize. The F-22 Raptor, I guess, relative
30
to
years old.
Yeah, 1997 it came out. So
my age.
Understood that. My biggest thing, and I'm torn on it because I understand that we got to keep up with the Joneses and we have to continue to iterate our equipment in the military to ensure that we are on the leading edge of the battlefield. And I understand equipping the warfighter with the best that we can offer. But the F-35, which also is getting up there in years, almost 20 years old now, came out in 2006. In the 8.5 years we did ZBT, it seemed like every, 5 to 6 months, I would hear another story about the F-35 just being a colossal problem for the Air Force. So as I said, I'm torn. I understand that we want to invest in new equipment, but the equipment we have is causing a lot of programs. So I don't know. What did you guys think about the F-47 that was announced?
I mean, you said obviously Trump Hegseth taking credit for it, but I actually watched the clip where he announced it and Trump actually said this has been in the works for 5 or 6 years. So I mean, you don't come up with a new 20, huge program overnight.
Right.
I mean, listen, my knowledge is limited. I think it's pretty cool. A new jet, my 10-year-old son thought it was cool. So I'll go with that on my take.
Yeah.
I'm pretty fired up about it. As a former artillery officer, fire support officer, I never got to work with F-35s, but I did work with a ton of Navy jets. But this F-47 is pretty sexy. It's going to be able to fly with drones, command drones in the sky. It's going to have a crew of like 3 or 4 people, I think. So it almost like gives me like World War II vibes of like those bombardiers, right? When the guys and gals are probably all working and Ironsmith in the back dropping bombs. But it's a state-of-the-art competitor to what China's doing, right? It looks like a freaking bat. It's going to be more cost efficient than the F-35 logistically, maintenance-wise, especially with the technology. I'm pro F-47, and to your point, it's been in the works since I was in the Army. And I think that's what people were seeing in the sky. People were reporting that as
somebody
like
said that to me. Somebody was like, "Is that the drones?" And those drones were like right around. Like I was in like the Philadelphia, Jersey area, like where the drones were popping, and someone's like, "I wonder if that is related." You know? So interesting.
That's what it was, Ryan.
Okay.
No, it's cool. Listen, I'm not gonna poo-poo a very cool jet because I mean, if you look at what the F-35 and F-22 can do. It's unbelievable. It's just interesting to me that, you know, I guess relative to, you know, the Air Force and the Navy jets, like they're the cool jets that have the awesome capabilities when like the F-14, the F-18, F-15, F-16, they just seem more reliable. And that's like kind of anecdotally. So I don't know. But overall, I think it's very cool that we have a new fighter jet coming and we're keeping up with the Joneses. And in no way do I think it's political. Like I tweeted about it and people were coming at me like, you hate Trump, that you're poo-pooing it. I'm like, no, I'm just basing this off of all the stuff that I've read about the F-35 for years. So until you fix that, but if it's more cost efficient and doesn't break, then I'm all for it. So.
One last note about this jet, which I find really interesting. Did you see what Trump said about selling it to our allies, a lesser version, so that in case one day they're not our allies, they don't have the same aircraft. They'll have a lesser version. Which, hey man, you never know what's going to happen in 10 years. So to his credit, I kind of vibe with what he said. Yeah,
and what was interesting too was with the F-22. There was a provision that said we would not, I think a congressional provision that said under no circumstances could we ever sell that jet. So interesting that that's a little different in this one. Speaking of things breaking, Tesla. I'm sure everybody has seen the videos and the reports that Tesla vandalism is on the rise. And now the FBI is getting involved because the FBI is asking for the public's help in reporting targeted attacks on Teslas and Tesla dealerships, which has been on the rise since January. And it seems like the past week or so, every day I'm seeing new videos of Teslas being vandalized. What do you guys think about all this vandalism that is happening?
Ryan, do you drive a Tesla? What do you drive?
I drive a F-150, so no, I do
of course
not
you
drive.
do.
Yeah,
of course you do.
Who
the hell needs an F-150 in the Philadelphia suburbs if you're not in like contracting? What are you doing driving an F-150?
Because I love it. It's so roomy.
She's hauling around all her gym equipment.
Yeah, listen, I've got a lot of kids. I don't want to drive a freaking minivan. There is nothing roomier than an F-150. I like the way it drives. It's super smooth. Leave me alone. I think it's pathetic. You know, I think what bothers me more than like the targeted attacks, because obviously there's groups that are, you know, planning this. What's even more upsetting to me is just these like people where you see they like pull up next to the Tesla or the guy that's walking into the airport and, you know, and he purposely just walks up and keys the Tesla. It's like, come on, people. It's unbelievable.
And I saw one video where the guy in another car was like swerved out in front of a woman driving a Tesla and then got out of his car and he's like got his face covered and to intimidate her or something of that nature. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, I have a buddy who lives, you know, my neighborhood here. He has 2 Teslas. And I jokingly, I was like, should we set up security overnight? I want to make sure you're protected. Do you need me to ride with you to work? I don't know. I just, under the guise of protest,
That's not protest though.
No,
that's like, I mean, listen,
it's borderline terrorism. And they were lighting up Teslas on fire here in Vegas at our one dealership, about 10 miles from me. So, and I think they lit up 10 cars. And I mean, that's just going to continue. I mean, people hate Elon so much with a passion now. And the liberal clean energy darling is now the enemy of some of those people. So it's just funny to see how tides turn.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think you got to be sorry to say, like a little wacko to
Well,
be
I think
someone who thinks you're going to vandalize a stranger's car because you don't like Elon Musk.
I think to have that level of hatred inside of you, that it
100%.
just it's maddening. It's super sick. So
Yeah.
yeah. Tim Wall
hopefully-
actually did some stand up and included the Tesla vandalism in it. I don't know if you guys caught that, and he was getting like
Unreal.
roasted, and it was funny. Trump actually like started talking about it, and
Tim Walz needs to take a knee and probably stay out of the limelight for a little bit.
Yeah.
I just think it shouldn't be talked about by anybody in any sort of
everybody should be denouncing it. Every single person on every single side should be saying this is not right. Knock it the hell off,
Right.
So
you shouldn't be afraid in this country driving down the road that someone is going to do harm to you because you're driving a certain type of vehicle. Like I think it's ridiculous that you drive an F-150, but I'm not going to come slash your tires, Ryan.
I'm not going to keep Pete Navy into your F-150.
Right. You drive that F-150.
You know why I drive the F-150? Because I got lots of room on the back bed where I can put all my Navy stickers. That's why I drive the F-150. So there you go.
Cool. You're just bringing the value of the car down every time you do that. But speaking of the Air Force and the Navy, new memos went out to warn sailors and airmen that they should not be posting about political speech online and in person, and even mentioned UCMJ ramifications if they were in fact to be caught speaking in a political manner. Acting Air Force Secretary Gary Ashworth said the First Amendment protects freedom of speech and permits the expression of ideas for all Americans. Service members, owing to their critical role in our national security and the duties and obligations of service, have accepted limits on their freedom of expression. So what do you both think about the limit on the freedom of expression for those in uniform?
I ride with this to the day I die. As a content creator who started his brand and page when he was in uniform in service and hid his persona, his personality, everything, I think this is 100% the right move. I would even go as so far to say soldiers and anyone wearing the uniform should either not have social media. I know it's really harsh, guys. I know it's really harsh, but they fucking probably shouldn't have social media with the stuff that's getting posted these days. Or everything needs to be private, and you have to basically report that you have an account. I've been trying to say similar for the last few years. I have friends on both sides of the aisle. We have friends on both sides of the aisle that are still in uniform that still to this day publish political content, what their leanings are. Anything from DEI to pro-Trump stuff, I think it all has to go. I think if you are in uniform and you publish content on social media, you're in the wrong. Unless it's something to maybe be at the behest of your unit or something that's vetted, approved. That's just me. I'm 35 now, but I hate when I see people in uniform posting politically charged content. I can't stand it.
Well, I think that, again, this isn't new, right? No. This is not new. It's just a reminder. So
they're reinforcing what
the policy already exists. And like, I agree with you. I don't want to see, I think it is a total distraction from what the military represents to have them, I am like, listen, I'm all about freedom of speech. But again, when you sign up to serve in the military, you lose some of those freedoms while in uniform for a good reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see people in uniform giving their opinions. If you want to be at your house with your friends and talk about whatever you want to talk about, but I don't want to see it. And I think I haven't noticed anything like elevated. Obviously the different service branches are seeing some stuff, but it's just a reinforcement of an already existing policy.
Yeah. And I would go so far as to say with you, Rob, people using the uniform across social media to kind of boost their own presence. It's I don't agree with that. And especially when you have a website then on your social media where you're selling merchandise. So you're certainly profiting from your presence on social media. It's a fine line, and people want to cry about freedom of speech, but you can have your freedom of speech, but also when you put on the uniform, you have to adhere to the UCMJ, and those rules might be counter to your First Amendment rights, but that's what you signed up for. So anybody who's crying like, oh, I should be able to post whatever I want, that's just not the case, because you are under UCMJ, and that's just the way it goes. And I think a lot of people are upset right now. And certainly anytime you talk about politics in the military, it's just oil and water, I think. And you should just, whether you agree, I mean, anybody who served for multiple presidencies, I'm sure maybe you liked one commander-in-chief and you didn't like another commander-in-chief. Doesn't matter. Still the commander-in-chief. I mean, we've all served with people in our unit that you probably didn't like. You probably had commanders you liked, commanders you didn't like. That's just the way it goes sometimes. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, and you just got to deal with it.
I want to just say one last thing to that. Rob, I actually disagree though with the notion that if you're in uniform, you shouldn't have social media. Because I will say, just from personal experience, my daughter found a deeper understanding as a young female, following some of these young female influencers that are still in uniform. There's some young Marines females that are still in uniform, and she started following them and really began to have a deeper understanding of this idea that like she can be both. She can be a feminine woman and she can also be a Marine. And so I think if you just say to service members, like, you want social media, keep it private, it continues to that civilian military divide. Let people see people out there serving in military. Like, keep the politics shit out of it. But I actually think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Then on that note, then people have to just be authentic and not disingenuous, and not, posting or going to great lengths to embellish what they're actually doing in service, and actually showing what it is that is their job or their duty description or their responsibility. But then you get in some murky waters there with what you can and cannot say.
Yeah.
I'm always on the mindset, just be careful what you're posting. Maybe don't post it. But to your point, Ryan, I 100% agree. I'm a content creator. I get the youth. I get, Gen Z, and it is important to have that, to not shape perception, but have that narrative and show what is happening. There's a reason why the academies and the military have social media, right? I think it's important, but I think we just need to be smart with what we're posting. And there's just straight up no room for activism in the military when there's officers or enlisted or anyone in uniform publishing anything political. There's got to be a full stop there.
I think full stop on the political stuff. And Ryan, I understand how your daughter would see benefit in seeing those young officers posting. I just think, as a service member, you need to know I can be held accountable for something I put out there. And also, you should be aware that if your commander says, hey, delete that, take that down, you can't argue that. I think there needs to be some hard and fast black and white rules to govern what they're doing, because, Rob, I don't think you can just say, like, hey, use your best judgment. We've all been 22 to 24 years old. Sometimes your judgment's not great, and you might think,
especially after a few drinks, you get a little loose with what you want to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, there's a running joke with one of the other guys at Barstool fights, and he's like, if you don't hate yourself that posted to social media 10 years ago, you're not maturing as an adult. Like, you should look at stuff you used to post and be like cringy. Totally. But so that, to my point, you're not always using the best judgment when you're that young. So I think ultimately we'll just wrap it up to say, you need to realize that you can get in trouble. Keep posting, that's fine. Don't do politics, and just be very careful, because you could get in trouble. So, all right. Recently, I don't know if you guys saw this list, but there was a military historian because of the 250th anniversary of the Army that is coming up this year in 2025. And he made a list, and this list got some traction because he left off Saving Private Ryan, because he said that although the battle, Normandy at the beaches was accurate. The idea that that mission would have happened where an entire unit would be dedicated to go finding someone made it too much of a, quote, World War II movie, and that wasn't accurate, so he left it off his list. I don't agree with that. But this article that I linked to you guys has his top 5. And I'm just going to read the top 5, and it leads us into our interview. Spoiler, number 1 on his list was Black Hawk Down. But number 5 was The Thin Red Line. Any thoughts on The Thin Red Line?
Never watched it.
Never saw it.
Yeah.
I watched it one time. I watched it one time. It's not very good. So but he says the terms of how Nick Nolte portrayed an officer and trying to use an advantage against an unseen enemy was very, very convincing. I don't think that's enough to make it a good movie. Next one. Also, I would venture to say nobody's seen this movie. Cold Mountain with Jude Law, Nicole Kidman, and Renee Zellweger about a Civil War drama.
I think I have seen that years ago, like 20 years ago.
Okay.
I don't think war movie. I guess.
Number 3 on the list, From Here to Eternity, starring from 1953, starring Burt Lancaster, Donna Reed, and Frank Sinatra. New Jersey's
Ryan's
own.
favorite film.
Oh, really? Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 2 on the list has crept into my list as one of the better military movies of recent memory, and I thought it was very good, and it was Fury with Brad Pitt.
I thought so too. I was in the military. I was still in the Army at the time when I watched that in my armored battalion, and I loved it. I mean, and a lot of the armor and tanker bros were like, this is kind of legit. I think Brad Pitt, the whole crew went through, Fort Benning. They went through some of the armor school training. They really tried to dial in some of those tactical pieces. But I haven't watched that one in maybe 9 or 10 years almost. So I need to watch it.
I think that haircut that he had in that movie had a hold on our culture. For a little while there. Ryan, have you seen Fury?
No. So I've successfully only seen Black Hawk Down, but I feel pretty accomplished because I saw the number 1 movie. So I'm good. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So
Ryan, how are you with Brad Pitt? Do you like Brad Pitt as an actor?
I mean, I'm neutral. I'm neutral with Brad Pitt.
Okay.
I'm not like going to go run out and see a Brad Pitt movie, but he's got some good stuff.
Benjamin Button, so good. I cry every time.
Okay. All right. But anyway, yes, number 1, Black Hawk Down. This historian said it did feel authentic, the feeling of isolation, trying to work with each other in this environment. You don't always see the enemy who's shooting at you or the crowd surrounding the hellbound helicopter. So I'm partial to that movie. And that brings us very nicely into our guest, Colonel Larry Perino, who was a young lieutenant who fought in the Battle of Mogadishu. And here is Colonel Perino. All right, joining us now, a very special guest here on the Bold American podcast, a 1990 West Point graduate, rugby player, I think first rugby player that I've actually ever interviewed. So that bears mentioning. Served a very distinguished military career and has awards to include Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Legion of Merit, among others. Colonel Larry Perino. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. So the reason I wanted to have you on is right now there is a documentary that just came out a few weeks ago on Netflix called Surviving Black Hawk Down, and it's a 3-part series about the Battle of Mogadishu, which you had a very active role in that battle, and you had a very active role in the documentary. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, wait, I'd actually forgotten your name until you'd come on the screen and done your interviewing. But I really wanted to get into that battle. But certainly before we even get to that, could you take me through the timeline from the time you graduated from West Point until the Battle of Mogadishu, so we can have a better understanding of what the start of your military career was like?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated at the end of May 1990, and then I reported later that summer to Fort Benning for infantry officers basic course, which it's about a couple months long as you go through there, and then rolled right from there to to Ranger School. And it was so good because that's also too when the Gulf War was just kicking off. So you know, Desert Shield and then Desert Storm. And because it was kind of interesting. So we decided, I was one of the classes that we went straight through Ranger School through Christmas, because they just said, no, you're not going to cancel any of the Christmas exodus. So I got to go through all phases, and then it was 4 phases of Ranger School. So there was the city phase, there's the mountain phase, there was a Florida phase, in the swamps, and then you had the desert phase in Dugway, Utah. So that was like 70 straight days. Got to walk up the Tennessee Valley Divide on Christmas Eve, walk back down it, walk back up it again on Christmas Day. It was awesome. But then, got my Ranger tab in February. And then from there, I deployed to my first duty station was the Republic of Korea, where I was a platoon leader in an air assault infantry battalion right up on the DMZ of South Korea, which was a great place to learn your craft, especially as a young lieutenant. And right there, I kind of had to extend my time there for about 6 months. So I did 18 months straight in Korea. And that's really, because to put my packet in to be considered for selection into the 75th Ranger Regiment. One of my sponsor, my rugby coach is a Ranger legend, and he's a West Point grad, and he was and he's also, his name's Frank Kearney. So he was my TAC and a rugby coach. He was my tactical officer for my cadet company and a rugby coach. And then my sponsor was an NCO, Sergeant First Class, who also came from 2nd Ranger Battalion. He was in Grenada. So I always had that kind of influence. That's something that I really wanted to do. So I put my packet in, and then they asked me to stay a little bit longer to get a little bit more seasoned there. So that's why I stayed 18 months. And then I showed up in the end of December, beginning of December of 1992 in at 3rd Ranger Battalion of Bravo Company. So, right there, I was there for about a month, went in for Christmas, came back, and we immediately started deploying. We went to, spent 2 weeks in Korea. I went back to Korea. Korea in the winter, came back, went to Thailand for several months where we trained with the Thai Rangers and around the area called Lupari. Had great field problem. We went through great exercise. And then, we were doing a big joint special operations training event out at Fort Bliss, Texas, when my company and several other folks were pulled aside and weren't told why, but all of a sudden, a C-5 showed up on the airfield. We at Fort Bliss, we walked on it and it flew us to Fort Bragg, which became basically our initial train up. That's where we found out where Task Force Ranger was formed.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So, deployments in more recent years, I think you have a pretty big buildup. You go to JRTC, and for months on end, and certainly your unit being a more specialized unit, I can understand that timeline would be shorter. But that's kind of crazy that you didn't really know anything, and they just said, "Hey, you're going to Bragg." And then, how long were you at Bragg before you got to Africa?
About 10 days,
Okay.
Really. And so, and that's where we met up with, the other members of the task force. So, and even though we were working with all those units and more at Fort Bliss, now we were working with different folks they had actually been training on this for about a month before us. And this was all about to get Mohammed Farah ID. So what predicated this was in July of that year, there was an attack on and killed 24 Pakistani peacekeepers attributed to Mohammed Farah ID, the warlord, primary opposition of the security that they were trying to establish in Somalia. That's all I know. And then over a period of time, I think up to 12 U.S. casualties from IEDs, roadside bombs had been blown up out there anyway. So part of the task force were the operators and the helicopter pieces. They had done some initial training and realized that they needed a ranger element to provide an outer cordon security. They needed more manpower as they're going to go into an urban environment. So that's kind of how it started. But for about 10 days, we would, we're task organized as, there were Rangers and helicopters flying in with the assault force, where the assault force would come in, either take down a vehicle, or a moving convoy, go into a building, anywhere, and then we would either provide additional security with up armored Humvees and or fast rope right down in front of the targets and secure it from the outside, and to keep people from squirting out and to keep people from running into the target.
So certainly you're on the more seasoned end of being a lieutenant at this point. You're not a fresh butter bar, certainly going in. You had that time in Korea, but Mogadishu was your first foray into battle, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's my first time in a combat zone. I even though we did live ambushes on the DMZ, this was a whole nother thing. But I would point out though, and that's the benefit. I was with that platoon for 10 months straight. 10 months straight, had the same 4 squad leaders and platoon sergeant throughout the whole time. And that, I think that and the deployments for us kind of, we were pretty seasoned as an organization. Yeah. But I just want to point out, and it still makes my head hurt thinking about it. I had just turned 24 when I got there. I was 24 years old. My son's 29. I'm like, and it turned 24. We were just kids.
Well, yeah. I'd like to so nice to meet you, Colonel. And, I was sharing with Connor and Rob that admittedly, I had never watched Black Hawk Down. And so that's been my homework over the last couple weeks. And then I got a chance to watch the documentary. And, I come from a Marine Corps family. My brother was killed in Iraq in 2007. So sometimes the war movies get to me a little bit. But I started having conversations after watching the movie. And in fact, I was talking with one of my friends and he said, when he finished TBS down in Quantico, Black Hawk Down became mandatory. So it was what they were showing all of the recent Marine Corps grads. And I felt that was so interesting because I think from the Marine Corps' perspective, it was the truest depiction that they could offer at the time from a somatic movie. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on, when that came out. Obviously it had to bring up a lot of emotions for you. And, what were your feelings when, that was 2001, right? When that movie was released? Yeah. Yes. So, how were you feeling when the movie came out and your character was basically, they had taken if I'm correct, I saw that they had taken 3 or 4 different different real people, you being one of them, and meshed them into Josh Hartnett's character. And so, so I just love to know, what was going through your mind? Were you ready for this? Did you have mixed emotions? How did it all feel?
Well, I was prepped for it.
Yeah.
So just so you know, so my platoon sergeant happened to he was working at SOCOM. He actually went over as one of the advisors.
Okay.
In a capacity of advisors, because they had a whole platoon plus of Rangers. The Army provided the Rangers. The Army also provided actual Black Hawk helicopters and Little Birds for the filming. So he kind of made it happen. I'm kind of glad that there wasn't a Larry Perino in the thing. I was perfectly fine with that. For me personally, there's a couple things I thought that movie did well, and I understand. Look, by the way, I'll tell you another story about that. But what I did well is I thought it captured the intensity fairly well. Just the intensity, sometimes even more. Like, damn. But I thought it, and really what I also thought it captured very well, the interactions between the Rangers and the operators and the pilots. We were real in the book. The book is a little bit different. It seems I don't think it seemed like there was a big clash between the organizations. And it really wasn't. It was a couple individuals, but us at the lieutenant to senior NCO to the officers, for us, we got along with them just fine. and because half the people from that other unit came from a Ranger background anyway. We knew them. And so, but that's what I thought was really good. Now, as far as it was kind of funny, my old platoon sergeant, he just said, Hey, Larry, it's a movie. That's all I would just say. It's a movie.
Yeah,
and I got it. So was it accurate? No, I wasn't expecting it to be, it had a few scenes in there, like the scene where Corporal Smith had passed. I was like, oh shit, I really wish it was that nice of an area where we had to treat him. But here I'm standing here, kind of a surreal moment. So I was honored. I was invited to go to the premiere, and they did a premiere in DC, Washington, DC. And I'm sitting there and I'm having a discussion with Josh Hartnett, like you do. And I'm saying, so how was it hosting Saturday Night Live? And, the night before, and he's like talking to me, great. And all of a sudden I hear this, excuse me. There's Dick Cheney with his popcorn, like walking right behind me. And so I go, wow. And I was in uniform there because I was still serving. And so I did see the movie right when it came out. And I remember standing outside of the theater on the red carpet, and we were waiting for the transport to take us to the after party. And I look around, and there's Jerry Bruckheimer, like right in front of me. Right. And he starts, so he goes, I didn't get a chance to, so he introduced himself to me. Very, very kind gentleman. He asked me what I thought of the film, and I thought it was great. And he just looked, he goes, I just want you to understand is we could not do it like the book, because the book has 26 main characters, and in a 2-hour movie, people would not. So that made sense. And really, I'm here to put butts in seats, and that's what we're doing. So he was, he didn't have to do that, but I was grateful that he did.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I would say is everybody seems to think that was really the narrative of the battle. It really wasn't. So I think the documentary does a little bit better in that.
Yeah,
sense.
for sure. Documentary is always going to do better, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like that a movie's never going to be what actually happened, like no matter what. But it did capture the intensity of what was happening over there. I felt like that's a great way to put it, because I felt that watching it, but loved watching the documentary after that. So
yeah, and we actually it was a long time ago now. We had then Sergeant Eversman, Master Sergeant Eversman on the show and chatted with him about the movie, and he had mentioned the same thing. Like in the movie, he's there overnight, when in reality he wasn't there overnight. But echoed what you just said about making the movie and just ultimately being able to tell a story as opposed to being 100% accurate. And I just want to really quickly go back to something that Ryan said. And I graduated in 2006, so that movie came out when I was in high school. And then how do you feel about that? Because I can tell you at West Point, they used that movie for teaching lessons, whether we were out at Camp Buckner or doing different training exercises. It was used different parts of the movie. So although maybe it wasn't 100% accurate, there were themes that were very helpful to students learning to be lieutenants. How do you feel about knowing that what you went through was used as a teaching tool?
I tell you the truth, I couldn't be happier. When I was still in uniform, I kind of told myself that, I wouldn't really talk about it, but I would agree to talk about it if mostly I would only turn if you were in uniform. I wasn't really to tell a war story, mm-hmm. especially around people I know, because nobody can ruin a war story more than a witness. So you got to be very careful, but I didn't want to really do that. I always said if it could, basically for training, if I could find some way to someone to learn something from what either we did or failed to do, or some of the things that, and keep somebody alive later on in these conflicts as we go on, because it will happen. I felt it was necessary. And then I also kind of feel like it was necessary, too, in a lot of ways. It helps tell that story, because at the end of the day, we lost 19 Americans after that. And I don't want them to forget it. You know, I really, and they don't think they should be forgotten. I would have to say I spent 25 years and I still do it today to find some way to make their deaths make sense, their passing make sense, their sacrifice make sense, make it mean something. So, and make it matter. So that's kind of why I tell you, every time I have to doing that, filming that documentary, and I've spoken at several events at a time, and it takes a lot out of me mentally and really emotionally, but I feel like I have to do it. And so, and it's my obligation to do it at this point.
Yeah,
Well,
Larry, on that, I'm a 2012 West Point grad. I actually grew up in Germany, and the book came out when I was a kid. My dad gave it to me. It was that and Harry Potter. I watched, it was the first rated R movie I ever watched. I was 12 years old in Germany with my Boy Scout troop, and we watched Black Hawk Down in 2002. And then fast forward, I go to West Point. Connor's a few years ahead of me, sir. But my dad, I think, had interacted with you. He's class of 87. So I think back in the day, there was some sort of, he's an infantry guy too. So I think you guys may have crossed paths at some point. But on that note about the emotional and kind of like the memory of those guys and just keeping the esprit de corps going of that mission, have you gone back to Mogadishu? Would you ever consider going back? And then what are some of the things you've done since, that event to support each other and kind of rally the troops and keep the memories of those 19 guys alive?
Would I go back? I swore to myself I would never go back, but I wouldn't mind just seeing some of the dirt that I walked over before. Mm-hmm. And also too, I'll probably be a little bit depressed because 31, 32 years since, I don't think there's much improvement. You know, it's not much improvement, and that's rough. But through there are a group of folks that I wish as a whole group we would do more things to be able to support each other. But I have made lifelong friends from that event, the task force, and we were only together 4 months roughly. That's that. But just that, friends for life. I still talk to the majority of the folks that were in my platoon. I'm friends with several of them to this day. I couldn't go to the 10th because they'll do reunions period of time. I couldn't go to the 10 year because I was getting ready to deploy to Iraq, but I did go to the 20. And then they had it. I did not go to the 25th because I was asked ahead of time to do a podcast and speak on a fireside chat at West Point on the 25th. So it was me and Lee Van Arsdale. We were the only two grads, along with Kyle Lamb, who was an operator, retired sergeant major, but him and I were in the same compound all night on the fourth, on the fourth, third and fourth. And so, and then last year on the 30th, there were 3 events, one in Knoxville for mostly the Rangers. The operators did one in the compound, and the 160th did one at their headquarters. I wound up going to the 160th just because there was a whole group of guys from my old platoon that were there. And it's always good to kind of reconnect with those guys. Absolutely.
Yeah. And speaking of that, now keeping the memory alive, now we have this documentary on Netflix, which is 3 parts, as I mentioned. I encourage everyone to go watch it. And I was talking to somebody who's much younger than me, and I said, have you ever seen Black Hawk Down? Do you even know what the Battle of Mogadishu was? And they didn't. And I kind of just take that for granted because Black Hawk Down is a movie that I've watched countless times and really, really enjoy and certainly know the story well. So do you have any understanding what the impetus was for this documentary, and then your involvement, which I thought was great to get that other perspective from someone who is not used traditionally in the sense during the movie. As you said, there's no Lieutenant Perino in the movie, but you're obviously very much featured in the documentary. So how did you feel about this documentary coming about?
Well, it was kind of interesting, and every once in a while you get folks that will reach out periodically to want to talk, but it was I actually got a phone call from a young man from the UK, and he said what he was doing. They're researching to because it was the 30th anniversary, so close to the 30th anniversary, about doing a documentary on Somalia for the battle. I go, okay. And I kind of wondered if this was really legit, but then he said, no, this is part of Ridley Scott's production group. He does a live production group from the UK. And he says, there's funding behind it. And we're looking at providing potentially, he mentioned that Netflix would probably pick it up, but that's what already from the beginning. So it sounds like it was kind of legit. And that was over a period of months. I started speaking with him. With him, and I kind of found out, so it started gaining a lot of speed. I talked to the director. I met him on Zoom. We call back and forth to the UK, and from what I understand, they actually interviewed a lot of people. Mm-hmm. How many, I have no idea. And to be honest with you, one of the reasons why I wanted to watch the darn documentary is to see who else they interviewed.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
No, it was fascinating too. The fact I thought that they included Somalis as well. Not just the soldiers.
Yeah, I loved that.
I did. And some of them I just kind of had to smirk and go, okay, I could get really upset, but then I just let it go. But I really watched to see who else was there. And but they picked, okay, first let me just say, before I saw it, when I heard the title, it's called Surviving Black Hawk Down. I'm like, what kind of, that sounds lame. I did. Yeah. I go, that's lame. But having watched it, it doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't. It does. There's a lot of crap that all happened there. There's some interesting pieces to it. But what they did was, I think, key parts of what's going on, they chose us for that. I think mine was clearly at the crash site all night long. They wanted somebody who was there with, because, and that's also, that's where Corporal Smith had passed, right at the target. I think that's why they really pushed me there. But I thought the way how do I describe it? The way I did is they put us all in a dark room, shut the lights off, and there's an elephant, and they tell us to go ahead and feel the elephant, and then tell us what you saw, right? Mm-hmm. Describe what you see. So you're going to talk about what you saw, but you're never going to get the whole elephant. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes perfect sense.
And then they weaved our stories together, along the theme from the beginning to end. So that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah.
And then I go, okay, I understand.
Got it. And I mean, like, what was briefed to you going into Mogadishu versus how it played out? In other words, do you think you were prepared and your unit was prepared, that task force was prepared to experience what you did with those Blackhawks going down? Because I have to imagine, maybe in your wildest dreams, you never thought like someone would be able to get one of our Blackhawks, let alone multiple Blackhawks on the ground. So just what you were expecting versus what actually happened.
I think we were well prepared as we could be as individuals. What got me, and this is not going to get political, I'm just going to say it as a matter of fact. When we did our initial train up at Fort Bragg, we actually had another full platoon of Rangers. So another 40, 50 guys on there to be able to use as a quick reaction force, our own internal quick reaction force. We also had AC-130 in support as far as the package. More so the AC-130 support, absolutely devastating. We trained up with them, but somehow, some way within the National Command Authority, when we deployed over there, they said, oh man, it sounds like mission creep. You're limited to 400. When did this become an effing math problem is my point. This is a capabilities issue. And unfortunately, I kind of run into shit like that in my 25 years that, always made me mad. When you try to turn it into a math problem, it's a capabilities. Do you have the capability? So now we had a hodgepodge staff, which had elements of JSOC staff, Delta staff, 160th staff, the 3rd Battalion staff in a small organization, that has to, tie in all the ISR, all the intel links to be able to drive intel and run operations. We're short a full platoon. We're short a full platoon. We had to train one of our 3rd platoon how to get on Humvees and train on Humvees, which is the other platoon that we couldn't go, because they didn't come. And then no AC-130. So morally relied on a flying an inner cordon with snipers on each on a Black Hawk with an outer ring of little birds. And then instead of that big ring and see all be all with the AC-130 overhead, that's not there. What we're seeing is, and we had actually trained for a Black Hawk going down, kind of eerie, but we would go down south of the, we had a combat search and rescue aircraft. It was a mixture of Rangers, PJs, and, and operators. And we always would shoot on along the coast. We working skills, but one time we were all flying back, all of a sudden they called the aircraft to fake a crash, on a sand dune. Scarily though, it was Super 6-1, which was the aircraft that was shot down.
Yeah. Whoa.
Wow.
So that was the one that we all diverted through and then secured it, got him out and flew away. I just thought that was bizarre.
That's eerie.
That's freaking bizarre. But now, did that fully prepare us? But we did exercise it. We knew what we had to do. So that was unspoken. So, but then I'll also say, here's our tactics. When they start volley firing, you start seeing RPGs up there. You may look, a helicopter at 100 feet is a big freaking target. I don't care how fast it's flying. And if it's fast, if you want to use it as a sniper platform, you can't fly very fast.
Right. So
that probably was, I think, a little bit, maybe too much hubris. Maybe we didn't think they would do something like that, but it was definitely, of all the missions we had done, that one was hot, and it was in the hottest area that we knew. We knew by going to where we were in that period of the city, right by this area called the Bakara Market. General Garrison had told us months ago when we asked, he said, I will never send you into this area unless I absolutely know that the target is 100%, because I know if you go in there, it's going to be a gunfight, which is exactly what happened. So, what I would just say is, we were about, we went in the raid, got the two. There were two key Adid lieutenants. We're meeting with 12 of their security. We got them all. Didn't kill them. Got them all. We were shuffling them out, throwing them on the aircraft, not the aircraft, but throwing them on the vehicles because there wasn't a LZ for us to land. And we were about ready to call exfil when the first helicopter goes down, like right over my head, about 2 blocks down, and we could see where it went down. And immediately we go, mission changed, we're going. And it was almost unsaid. And what's the fastest? Do we load up and drive, or do we just move on foot? And the decision was made to move on foot. So, and going back to, so yeah, we had prepared for it, but when the oh shit happens, because that's the oh shit, right? And then shortly after that, a second oh shit happens when Super 6-4 goes down. And harken back to your lieutenant days, you've just lost momentum. And now what do you, with no reserve, very few reserves. So we just lost momentum. So the only way you're going to get it back, the momentum, is you're going to have to fight. And it's probably you're going to have to bleed. And that's what happened. Murphy had us in a headlock that day. So he just did.
Certainly. I have one quick question, and then one other question I want to wrap things up with. Quick question. Do you think playing rugby played into your toughness at all, being lieutenant and fighting in this battle?
I did. I do. I always tell people I was on two of the greatest organizations I've ever been on was Army Rugby at West Point and the 75th Ranger Regiment. Those are the two organizations. Army Rugby is the most successful sport in at the academy as far as win records continually. But it's just the discipline, the tenacity. It's just those things that, guys that I looked up to played rugby. General Kearney, he was that Lieutenant Colonel Kearney, but General Kearney was one of those guys that I looked up to. He was my rugby coach. I continued to play. I played even all the way up until, I came back to the Ranger Regiment again. I kind of quit playing rugby full time probably after I played 10 years while still in uniform.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess maybe General MacArthur was onto something when he said every cadet an athlete. So I could certainly, understand how that might prepare you. And then the last question I'll leave you with, if you could speak to young Lieutenant Perino right now and tell him anything, going into the 75th Ranger Regiment, going into the Battle of Mogadishu, what is it that you would tell him that you might echo to any lieutenant getting ready to take over a platoon?
I think look for opportunities to demonstrate. Always find out you can always do something and never try to detract. Something I learned in Ranger School, when you're getting deprived, out there in Ranger School, people tend to look upon themselves very insular. They get very selfish. Their nature is to become very selfish. That self-survival mode kicks in. And you've got to fight it. You absolutely have to fight it. You can't think about yourself. You have to think about the mission. In a lot of ways, I think I was able to handle it because I had so much other shit I had to worry about on my right and my left and what was going on that I didn't have time to look. And the fact is, I got a guy bleeding out right at my foot. I was touching his shoulder when he got shot, and he's dying. I can't get, what can you do? And And at one point, I was just be honest. I couldn't, it was like, well, shit, what can I do now? I'm pretty much freaking useless. I've got Smitty. He's dying. I've got a wounded team leader with me. I've got a squad leader. He seems to be fine. I'm fine. Other part of my chalk, my portion of the platoon that I had, there's at least 3, if not 4 wounded across the street, directly across the street. By the way, that's where that family was. That was right across the street. That was in the documentary. And I'm like, well, what can I do? And I stopped. And it was interesting. I was looking at one of my team leaders. He had this wild look in his eye. And I was telling him, are you okay? Yeah. No. Are you all right? Yeah. You sure? Yes. What you didn't realize, I wasn't really talking to him. I was talking to me. Yeah. Because really quick, I learned, and I even said, I've said it a couple of times, and you can always do something. And you just know, if you're going to do it, not doing anything, at least not make it worse. And at some point I realized if there's things that I could do, and if I lost my shit at any given time, it's worse off for everyone else. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. Was I scared? Yep, absolutely. But I was caring about everybody else. And that, I think, as a lieutenant, there's always something you can do. And whatever it is, no matter how stressful it is, they can't see, you got to be almost like a robot as much as you can. You can't let them see you sweat. You can't let them see you panicked, because that stuff is contagious.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Well, that's fantastic advice. I wish I had heard that when I was a lieutenant. But if you're a young officer or NCO listening to the show now, that is certainly great advice. Again, the documentary is called Surviving Black Hawk Down, the movie, the book, Black Hawk Down. Colonel Perino, thank you so much. Appreciate your service to this country. Thank you for joining us and telling your story. And I hope, sir, candidly, you mentioned where you live, and I'm not going to say it for everybody, but as I mentioned, that is one of my favorite parts of the country. So hopefully I can find my way down there. We can have a beer, because I think I got about 20 more questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to let you go for today. But we appreciate it. Thank you very much, Colonel Perino.
Anytime, guys. Thanks.
All right. Thank you to Colonel Perino. That was excellent. I think it's interesting to hear other perspectives. I think for so long I had seen the movie. So it was cool years ago when I got to talk to Sergeant Major Eversman to hear more about the making of that movie. But I think I can't say it enough. Go watch this documentary, Surviving Black Hawk Down, that goes into more detail and the firsthand accounts of people that weren't necessarily portrayed directly in the movie. But I thought it was a great documentary. And as soon as I saw it, I knew I wanted to talk to Colonel Perino, then Lieutenant Perino. But I thought that was awesome.
Great interview.
So it was great.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up. Any caveats from anything on today's episode? Rob, start with you.
No, guys, I'm good. I got to go handle some things, and then I'll report back next week as to what I got going on. But life's great. Staying sober, and keep on moving.
Excellent. Excellent. Ryan?
Yeah, I just loved the interview with Colonel Perino. And, you know, one of the things that really touched me is that, you know, he talked about how important it was for him to keep the memory alive of the 19 service members that didn't come back, that were killed. And so as a Gold Star sister, that really meant a lot to me. So
yeah, was great. No, it was awesome. Okay, first thing, I didn't get a chance to talk about last 72, but we were road tripping down to Maryland for family. It was my mother-in-law's birthday, a pretty monumental birthday. I'm not going to say the number because I don't know if she wants me to put that out there, but she also doesn't listen to the show, so I don't think she would even know if I put it out there. But nevertheless, so we were driving down and we tried to time it up to get Maggie something to eat. And we stopped at one of the rest stops just before we got out of the Jersey. And I might anger some people here. We stopped and we had Chick-fil-A. Now, Chick-fil-A is awesome, delicious, whatever. But I think the idea of fast food, especially as you're an adult, the idea of it starts to sound better than it actually is. Like, it was good, but I would much rather have like a sub from a deli in Jersey. And maybe this is me being a snob, that I just don't look forward to or search out fast food the way that I might have in my younger years. So I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but
I'm offended. I love Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Even on yesterday on Sunday, I was like, you know what I fucking want right now? I want a sandwich. It's always on fucking Sunday.
I always want Chick-fil-A on Sunday.
And it's just like, especially after like a workout, you get the Polynesian sauce on the sandwich, and
I'm biased. I don't know. I lived in Hoboken for 12 years now, and just growing up in Jersey, where I live now, like I just think all our mom and pop shops put fast food to shame, so I don't ever eat it. I don't search it out, but I don't want it to sound like I'm poo-pooing fast food.
They are super nice at Chick-fil-A though. I will say, like, out of all the fast foods, I love a burger and a chicken sandwich. In Vegas, we got plenty of different options, and Vegas is a food capital. Man, the service at Chick-fil-A, when one of those young kids just like, have a great day, Rob, it kind of just sets the tone, and it's just the hospitality at Chick-fil-A is top tier.
And I will say, we were waiting for a little bit, and they gave us a warm chocolate chip cookie to all the three folks who were in line, because the menu had just changed over and the fries weren't ready yet. So that was very nice.
Shout out.
So anyway, but yeah, anyway. And then the last thing, if I could recommend anything right now to watch, when you're done watching the Surviving Black Hawk Down documentary, have you guys watched the Karen Reed documentary on HBO?
No, I need to watch it.
What is this?
Wow.
What is it?
So it's if you Google Karen Reed, Rob, but it's the story of this woman who's on trial. Her boyfriend was a Boston police officer, and she's alleged to have run him over with her car after a big night of drinking. The documentary, it's done by her and her team, so obviously it's biased in that regard. But I remember the story when it was on the news. I didn't know all these details, and then I put something out on Twitter, and people were responding to me about what it's like in that area of Massachusetts outside of Boston. It's just, I'm just putting a must watch on this documentary. It's 5 parts, totally worth it. And, it's all out there in the news. So it was,
let's watch that and do a debrief on that. We're going to need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe in a couple weeks. Yep. For sure.
I'm down.
All right.
Okay.
All right. That's all I got. And again, thank you to Colonel Perino. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. And I really want to, hope that some younger officers had the opportunity to listen to that interview, because I always found that one of the best tools to hear from people who have been there before, been there, done that, and hear in their own words that honesty, better than anything obviously you could ever learn in a textbook, or tactics and things of that nature. Just hearing from people who have been there. I thought that was awesome. But that'll do it for us. Take care. Make it a great week.